We are here with Adlene Harrison. It is March 16th, 2015, and we're going to ask you some questions this morning.
Fine.
Tell us a little bit about your family, your parents, and how eventually they got to Dallas.
Well, I should read the thing I have in the breakfast room and name the cities in Russia and Poland, but I don't remember. So I could go get it.
That's okay.
And tell you. But my mother was born in Poland, which became Russia. My dad was born in Russia. And my mother's mother was a chef's. Her father was a goldsmith. My dad's sister married a Sheps, Joe Sheps. So my father and mother didn't know each other in Russia at all. My mother came here by herself on a ship from Bremen and landed in Galveston. And my dad and his brother-in-law picked her up there. And my mother was quite a bit younger than my dad. That's how they met.
Mm-hmm.
My father landed in Ellis Island, and his family name was Yasolevsky.
Mm.
And the customs guys, with all the immigrants and everything flowing in, could care less about these big names.
They couldn't spell them.
They couldn't spell them, so, and this happens with everybody that came. Everybody I talked to's parents came.
Mm-hmm.
And they said to my father, "What was your father's first name?" And he said, "Nathan." And he said, "Well, from now on, your legal name is Nathanson."
Ah.
And that was the end of that other name.
Mm-hmm.
And then his sister Jenny, who married Joe Sheps, had come ahead. And they lived in St. Louis. And so my father left New York and went to St. Louis to be with them. And they were bakers. Jenny and Joe were bakers, or had a bakery in St. Louis. And their breads were anything from white bread or whatever, plain old bread, to Passover time, they made matzahs.
Mm.
And whatever the association is, it still exists, where the rabbis come check the places that are doing kosher foods, matzah or whatever, came and decided their matzah was made illegally. And it was a big scandal in St. Louis. And it broke. They had to close the bakery. So then Joe Sheps decided to come to Dallas. Don't ask me why. Got on a train and came. And then my dad and Jenny followed him here. They opened a bakery, which became Sheps Bakery.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was a general manager, and Jenny was like working the business angles with my father. And my father hired all the Goldman brothers, my mother's brothers, and they all worked there. Practically all of them. I think one, Max Maynato, he was the youngest.
Mm-hmm. You had a huge family here at some point, didn't you?
That's right.
Yeah.
And they're none of the, my mother had 6 brothers, 2, and a sister. So there were 8 of them living. I think some of it died, maybe one at birth, or I don't know. But, so Tasty Bread, which was a national brand, bought Chef's Bakery. And all of them, Jenny, Joe, my father, all had to sign contracts that they wouldn't go back in the bakery business for 3 years or something like that. And I liked it fine as a kid because my dad was free, had a lot of free time, so he took us to all the national parks in California on the beach. Pretty good for us.
Mm-hmm.
And then my mother's brothers, the Goldmans, who were bakers over at Ship's Bakery, they really baked. They decided they wanted to open a bakery. Now, two of them, I think it was Sam and Abe, that moved to Houston and tried to open a bakery on their own. Didn't make it. So they came back here. And then all those Goldman boys, I think except Max, decided they wanted to open a bakery. And they named it Goldman Baking Company. My dad couldn't openly be involved with them because I guess his contract wasn't up. But when it was, then he came and he was sort of running everything with Julius Goldman. And when Julius died, my dad was president of that bakery for years. So the baking business was always going on somehow. My grandfather, my mother's father, Mayor Goldman, I don't think he ever worked a day in his life, but I read in something I've got for the Goldman thing that he had a dry goods store or something. Now, as a little kid, I don't remember a thing about that for 4 years. I said, I can't believe he worked for...
Maybe he was behind the scenes.
No, he wasn't behind the scenes. He was at his breakfast room table reading about the Torah and the this and the that from morning till night. And he was a volunteer over at Shereth Israel, and his house was very near. So he walked there every day. And he had chickens in the backyard, so I don't eat chicken now. That's the truth. That's the truth. And it dawned on me as a little kid, I think I'm eating one of those chickens, you know? And it just sort of turned me off.
You've been here, your family's been in Dallas a long time. Tell us a little bit about some of the differences and some of the changes you've seen through the years that has happened in Dallas, the city itself.
Well, an example, I was born here. I am now 91 years old. And I am next to the oldest Goldman, first cousins. Red Coleman is 9 days older than me. So what I remember, it was a very small town. I mean, how do I know it was a small town? But the population wasn't big. As example, when I went away to college, I think there were about 230 or 40,000 people in Dallas.
Where did you go to college?
I went to the University of Missouri.
Oh, you went out of state. Okay. How did you choose that?
I thought I wanted to be in journalism, and that was the best undergraduate journalism school. And when I got there, I think it's because I saw how hard my sorority sisters worked in the journalism school. I decided I don't want to do that. So I got a history and political science major. And I can tell you, studying political science in college doesn't help me in politics.
It didn't help. Did you come back to Dallas after that?
Yeah, never went any place. That was my mistake, probably.
Well, tell us a little bit about your early life, your early career.
Well, early career. When I came back from college, girls in those days, they didn't have law degrees. They didn't get medical degrees. They really did engineering. They had no professional training of any kind. So all of us college gals all ran to Neiman Marcus and thought that'll be a nice place to work. And that's where I went. And my first job there was to work in the room that holds all the clothes. And the one on the second floor at the only Neiman Marcus at that time was as big as a football field, because the clothes held women's, the fur department, the sports department. They were all on that floor. And when I went to Mary Lloyd, who was the personnel director, to get a job, she didn't like college girls too much. She never went to college. I think that was a problem. She thought we were all spoiled. She really did. And she was tough as nails. And she said, I'll see if you want a job, because I'm going to put you to work in the stock room. I said, I'll take it, you know. I was always game. And I went in that stockroom that day, and there were two other young women. One sat on the floor when we weren't busy and read the Bible. And the other one I don't think could read. I'm serious. And so it wasn't very exhilarating to me, you know. And one day I said, after about 2 weeks, I tell you what we're going to do today. I mean, they let me to be the boss. You know? We're going to move all the clothes. And all the heavy stuff like fur coats, cloth coats, suits, all the heavy stuff we're moving forward. And all the light stuff we're moving back. And we did it. And so, in about a week or so, a woman by the name of Rosalind Hart, who was the general buyer, the big buyer, good-looking woman. I mean, she must have been 6'2", very striking. She looks sort of like a horsewoman, you know. And she said, who did all of this? And they're already dying, you know, the two of them. And I just said, I did. She said, why'd you do that? I said, what's the sense in carrying all that heavy stuff, you know, to the back? I've got it near the door where we come in. And she said, tomorrow morning come to my office because you're going to work in the buyer's office part day and be on the floor selling. So I can't do that. Mary Lloyd said I was stuck in here for 6 months. She said, I'll take care of that. So that's sort of how I got started there. And then I was a sportswear buyer for separates, you know, like swimsuits, skirts, blouses. And I was there a couple years. And I left because I realized how political things could get. Because the buyers in that department that had dresses, suits, coats, and all, the bigger, more expensive stuff. One of them in particular was a single mother with a couple of kids. And she would tell all the sales girls in meetings, don't sell the separate, you can't make any money selling that. So I thought, you know, she needs the job. I don't need the job. I'm out of here. I'm not going to work with that. So I went to Joe Ross, who was a general merchandise big shot. He was right under Stanley Marcus. I said, Joe, I'm leaving. And I knew him before I ever went there. He said, what do you mean you're leaving? And I said, I'm not going to go into it, but I just don't want to have any friction between people. He said, I know exactly who you're talking about. I'll move her. And I said, no, you're not going to move her, and you're not going to say anything. She's good, she needs it, and I am out of here. So away I went. And then I went to work for a friend of mine at Vokes, who was the head buyer. And I was her assistant. And that was a great, fun job.
Did you meet your husband any time in here? Or was that still not in the picture yet?
No.
Okay.
I had a bunch of friends here. We'd go out practically every night. No romantic friendships with our crowd. It was just fun. We'd go to the Idlewild Lounge, and that became the Egyptian Lounge.
Mm-hmm.
Eat pizza. I didn't drink beer. I didn't drink anything, but you know, the guys would get in the car and pick all of us up, and it was real fun.
Mm-hmm.
And then I went to work shortly for the Levy brothers that had National Chem Search. In those days they called it National something. And Ike Mann, who was a terrific salesman, sort of taught those boys because their father had died. Lester came home from college and ran it.
Mm-hmm.
He was totally brilliant, but he learned a lot from Ike. So Lester says to me, listen, we're thinking about going in the retail business, and since you've been in it, we want to, our chemist has got something like end dust, you know, that spray?
Right.
And so we're going to do one called no dust. But we have to get in the departments in the department store, because in those days, you'd go in Tights, you'd buy all that stuff. So we want you to try to get them to buy this stuff. So I did that for a while. And I said to them, listen, y'all don't understand the retail business. You've got to give them money for advertising and stuff. And if you don't do it, they're not going to carry your product. So you're wasting your time. And mine too. So we quit that. Didn't do that. Now I'm trying to think of. Then I finally got into the political end of everything. Joe Goldman was running for city council, and he was my first cousin. And we were pretty friendly. And about every month, one of the Goldman women would have something at their house where all the aunts and uncles were there. And if it was your mother and father's time, then their kids were there. And then once a year there was sort of a major gathering of all of them. So Joe gets up and he said, I'm running for council and Adlene's going to run my campaign. I said, what are you talking about, running your campaign?
He hadn't discussed it with you?
Oh, no.
Oh.
No. I said, I'm not doing it. I don't know anything about it. He said, you'll know more than the most of them that are going to do something. So I thought, I got nothing to do. I'll do it. And that's how I really got into politics. Because he appointed me to the City Planning Commission. And I spent 4 terms on that, which is 8 years.
Right.
But there was a hiatus of 4 years. And then I didn't get an appointment. Joe was gone. And then after those 2 years, somebody else appointed me. So there was 4 more years.
On the planning commission also?
Yeah. And it's very interesting because that's how we got the Swiss Avenue Historic District. And we had a wonderful urban design guy who just wrote a book, and it's on my desk in there. The publisher sent it to me. And my name is in there, and he wrote me a personal, wonderful note. We're still friendly. He's Chinese, been in this country for years. And I sort of took to that stuff, but not in a political way. Leave it to me to always be the no voter or something. Those men probably could have strung me up. And there's stories written all over. You probably read it, maybe not. When I was sworn into the Plan Commission, the chairman said to me, the last woman on this commission brought us cookies. The last lady, he said. And I said, well, you have the wrong woman because I'm not bringing you any cookies. So that's how that started. You know, and there were many of these guys, they never worked with a woman in their lives. I mean, they may have had some previously, one at a time, but they wouldn't stand up to them, you know, nothing.
Right. When did you decide you were going to aspire to be on city council yourself?
Well, I didn't aspire to it. It was a strange story. Lincoln Properties, which the guy that owned Lincoln worked for Trammell Crow for years, and I knew Mac Pogue, and he always had like a holiday party, big holiday party. And Maury and I were there, and a lawyer by the name of Lewis Nichols, who always came up every week to represent zoning for his client, all of which I voted against. And he came up to me and he said, you know, you ought to run for the city council. I said, Louis, you must be nuts. I have never agreed with what you brought to me, ever. I mean, we were friendly. And I said, I don't think you would like that because that's the final word on those cases. And he said, listen, you're the one that understood what I was talking about at least. And the city needs somebody like that. I said, I don't know that I want to do that. Well, at the same party, this land planner comes up to me. His name was Bob Holland. He said, why don't you run for the city council? So when Maury and I leave, I said, you know, these two guys said I ought to run for the city council. And Maury said, well, you should, because you're always upset. If the plan commission votes a certain way, you could be sure if it was a big case, the council would vote against it. And you'd have a voice over there. I said, I'll think about it. So I did, and I had 4 male opponents.
Wow.
So there were 5 of us in the race, and the press club used to give this big luncheon and invite each set of people, and so us, the 5 of us, came to lunch, and you drew straws who would speak first. Those days they may have 200-300 at that luncheon. So I drew last, and I was really happy about that. And so every one of those others got up, and all they do is talk about me, why I shouldn't be on the council. So when I got up, I said, I am so happy because I know I'm going to win, because they can't say anything good about what they're going to do for the city, and I'm going to tell you what I'm going to do. You know, just cut them off at the legs. Jerry Bartis and I were in a runoff, obviously. You can't have 5 people without one. Mm-hmm. And I'm not going through all the things that happened there, but they weren't all too nice. And I stood up, and the election and the runoff was it was either Passover, the eve of Passover, or the next day. I don't know which. And all my little volunteer staff said, you know those women aren't going to leave the kitchen. They are not. They're not going to vote. That's a terrible break. I said, don't worry about it. They're gonna vote. I guarantee you they're gonna vote. And we won almost 60%. So that was a great experience. And I thought, you know, I've been in that City Hall building 8 years, and so I know where all the closets are. I know everything. A piece of cake wasn't a piece of cake. And I had enough sense to be quiet for 6 months.
At that time, were there any other Jewish council people or women that were on the Dallas City Council?
Well, not during my time, except when Joe was just Joe.
Previously, yeah.
But he picked me, so he was still on that council when I was on the planning commission. Mm-hmm. And one day there was a giant case over there near the theater center, and Eric Johnson was mayor. And the chairman of, like I was chairman of North Dallas, the chairman had to go to those luncheons with the council people before the council meeting to explain the zoning cases. And I was sitting next to Joe, because all the council people were there, mm-hmm. and myself. And I said, Mayor, I don't think you should vote on this case because you have a conflict of interest. Joe kicks me under the table because that guy was tough. He said, you know, and why shouldn't I vote on it? And I said, because your son-in-law is on the board of the theater center, and you just shouldn't. He said, Mrs. H, I think you're right. And I said to Charlie Cullum, you shouldn't vote either, because your wife's on the board. And
one by one. Nobody would be voting, right?
They didn't vote. So Joe said, my God, I cannot believe you did that. I said, well, you saw if you're right, mm-hmm. people, even if they're tough, you do something, you get something accomplished, and I never had any trouble with that mayor. Because if you were intelligent, he listened. And the council would sit there at lunch, they were all afraid of him.
When
They
you
really
were
were.
when you were councilwoman, was Wes Wise already mayor at that point,
Yeah.
the first time?
Yeah.
So tell me, just in brief, tell us a little bit about that experience and what are you really proud of as far as a project that you worked on really hard?
How many projects?
I don't know,
Which
pick a
ones?
few.
I don't know. Well, first of all, Wes was mayor. The council appointed me mayor pro tem. And then Wes decided he was going to run against Jim Maddox for Congress. And I said, don't do that. So I wasn't aching to be mayor. That would automatically make me mayor. Don't do that. He's going to eat you up like good cake. What do you want to do that for? Well, he didn't listen. So he resigned from the council and he got licked. I mean, a big licking. That was the end of his political days. So that made me mayor. And that's when the schools were integrated. Now,
What year was that?
let's see, 1974 or 5. I've got the papers in my files. In fact, I just read over the speech I made to the citizens of Dallas the day those schools were integrated. Worked on it 3 weeks, and I thought it was a really good speech. And one thing that brought everything home was that if I saw any act that was contrary to what was happening, and if I saw anything like a rock thrown, I don't remember how I said, I will consider it a criminal offense. We didn't have one thing happen because Little Rock had already shown you what would happen. I didn't want Dallas to do that. And I had some council people that would go around to their constituents and say they didn't care what the court said. We shouldn't integrate those schools. I mean, like Rose Renfro, do you remember that name?
Mm-hmm.
Did you know she was Jewish? She was an old South
think I
Dallas
did.
girl.
Oh, my.
Nobody knew it. She lived in Oak Cliff. She wasn't Jewish anymore, but she was a piece of work, I can tell you. So to me, that was a memorable time for me.
Who can you say would have been one of your role models around that time? Did you have anybody you really looked up to that you were kind of fashioning your political career after?
Not really, but I was very, very much a feminist. And so I would help everybody I could. An example, even on the Plan Commission, I was serving there all the time with no other women on there. And finally somebody appointed this really nice woman from Oak Cliff. Her husband was a doctor, and she was shaking in her boots. I said, don't worry about it. I'll take care of you. I'll teach you the ropes. And we became really close friends. And I would say the person that helped women the most in my time was Vivian Castleberry, because she was the women's news editor at the Herald. And every time one of us wanted to do something, we always had her back. She'd write these big articles.
Mm-hmm.
She'd push us. So that helped because you were always in a paper. You know, it's like having free publicity.
Right.
But the one before her, whom I shouldn't forget, and there's a picture of her with me in the hall, swearing me in to EPA when the president appointed me regional administrator of EPA. And I thought, boy, she swore Johnson in now.
Mm-hmm.
But we were good friends. She was very tough, brilliant woman.
Mm-hmm. Sarah Hughes.
And I think she probably was the first big-time person.
How would you say your Jewish roots tied in with your career?
Well, I would say it tied in because of my father, really. My father wasn't really very religious, in terms of traditionally religious. But at the dining room table every night, we ate pretty formally every night. I don't mean with fancy silverware and stuff, but you all sat down at the dining room table, and my dad would discuss issues that were happening around the country, around the city, and yet he wasn't a man that would come up to you and talk a lot, you know. And he would tell us our obligations to do something for people, and that don't ever expect to be thanked. No one's going to tell you thank you if you work hard and do something. If you do it because you want it, you do it because you want to help people. And he said, in our religion, you are your brother's keeper, and that's what you should do. And I would listen to him all the time, so I would work on bond issues, do all kinds of things. And then many, many years ago, when many of the Jews were coming into the States from Germany and all that, after Hitler, we had a big clothing drive, and I became chairman of that, and we had big rail cars on the rail tracks out at Fair Park, where we collected clothes, and we were putting those boxes in those rail cars that would ship them wherever they were needed. And I would do things like that because I wanted to, because I thought that's my way of helping. In fact, my husband used to say, "You are our charity," because when we married, I never worked. And not because I shouldn't have, because it would have been nice, because we weren't, you know, the very wealthy Jews in town. And he said, "You are our charity, and you're good at that. You should do it." And so I don't know. There are a lot of things that came up that are funny stories on the council, but I do think being in that seat when the schools were integrated was helpful. And the federal judge was nice enough to tip me off when he was going to do it. And so I had time to think it out.
Your political career came at a time when things were were changing and were very important in Dallas, different issues. Overall, can you tell us, before we end, tell us something that, just think about for a minute, what are you really, really most proud of? It doesn't have to be political, it could be personal, it could be anything. What are you most proud of so far with your life?
That's hard to say. Well,
don't think too hard about it.
No,
okay.
I'm not thinking hard about it. I'm proud of my daughter, who's always been one that was a big hard worker from the time legally she could work. She never wanted a thing from us. She went off to New York, didn't have a job, didn't have an apartment, stuff like that. And she still works just as hard as ever. She works for Rachel Ray and been with her 5 years now, 6 years. But she was freelance fashion consultant for years. She's been away 27 years. And I'm proud of her because she did it on her own. And I'm proud that I picked the right guy to marry, because he put up with a lot of things because I was always busy. And sometimes he'd say to me, "Listen, I don't work for EPA," you know, or stuff like that. He was the nicest guy. He was the nicest guy. So when he said something like that, I thought, you know, I better change my ways a little bit here.
Sounds
and
like
I'm
my
proud
husband.
of my my father and mother. I mean, they were unbelievable parents. And they taught me a lot. They didn't teach me how to keep my mouth closed, so, or anything like that.
Well, we're all proud of you too, and we're very, very happy that you granted us this interview today. And may you do das Leben bis 120, you know?
Yeah.
May you live to be 120.
Well, I'm
and we'll
almost
interview
there.
you then again.
I'm almost there.
Not quite.
But I think it's great y'all are doing this. I wasn't particularly happy about it. I'm never happy anymore about having those things.
Right. Well,
you know,
well,
I
we're
think
excited
you're doing
about
a good thing.
Yeah.
I really do. I hope you're going to get a good attendance.
We hope so.
Yeah.
Well,
So
you
far,
haven't
people
got
are
the
excited about it.
invitation out, have you?
We've got to save the date. And
Well,
then
the invitation actually went out
Did it go? You want me to turn this off
last
meanwhile?
Tuesday. No, it's okay. It went out last Tuesday, so, but when you send it out bulk, you know, some people get it the next day, other people it'll take a week or so. So, we're hoping most people will have it in the next, you know, today or tomorrow. We hope.
We've had different. I know I can recall several different events where we've had one or two of the people that we're honoring together. I remember Hadassah, we had something special with Laura Miller. Another time we did something with Ann Margolin. But to have all of you together, to me personally, as a female I'm involved at this much in my neighborhood association and in Richardson, the city of Richardson, I'm very active. I'm with the council and with the commissions and several. So to me, it's thrilling. To have all of you guys up there and honoring all the women together, I think is just a wonderful idea.
Well, somebody said to me, do you realize, some Christian friend of mine, and I have many of those just because of all my community work.
Sure.
In fact, they're better about giving me rides and stuff than the Jews, but they said to me, do you realize that there were that many women that were Jewish that, you know, became mayors or city council people? They said, why do you think that is? I said, I don't have the vaguest idea. They want to do something. I guess they want to do what I did. I wanted to do something for the city. I worked a lot with seniors, a lot with kids, way, way back there before the Planning Commission. And that was just my nature, and my dad taught that to me, I'm sure.
It's a disproportionate amount, especially today, of Jewish people, but especially Jewish women that are involved in politics and in their cities and their council and their commissions and their this and their parks and recreation and the libraries, whatever. It's amazing because it goes back to, that's why I was questioning you about your Jewish background. How did that play into all this? Because I think of the same thing you said. I'm nodding and you're going, my parents instilled those values in me. We're here to help others. We're here to do in the community. We're here to raise the funds and to collect the clothing for the poor. All those things. Not that it's not other people's values also, don't get me wrong. But I'm very proud that it's really strong Jewish values, that it brings it out in a lot of people, and they do get involved.
I'll tell you something interesting. And don't write this
I'm
down.
not. Okay. I'm quoting you. Is that not?
Don't you dare.
I'm not.